Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode 158 of the Audible Farm podcast, and this episode is brought to you by Couchtown Coffee. Couchtown Coffee is roasted right here in Iowa, and it's made to order. So you make an order, they roast it, and then ship it to your house. That's another thing. They ship it to your house. You don't even have to leave your house, and you get amazing coffee shipped directly to you. So check it out, couchtowncoffee.com. Find a coffee you like, make an order, and when you do, let them know Audible Farm sent you, and they'll give you 20% off. That's just another reason why Couchtown Coffee is awesome. Thanks, Couchtown. This week I'm sitting down with Michael Huskey. Michael Huskey is somebody that I met at a singer-songwriter type night at, let's see here, it was at El Rey's maybe in Iowa City? Yeah, I was down in Iowa City, and we had gone up earlier the night. I had accompanied Jesse Wilson, who also got invited to this event. And the two of us were down there. We played to, I think, open the night, and I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, Michael Huskey closed the night out. And it was pretty awesome. It was a good time. We sat there and watched everybody, and then watched Michael play. And he sang really well. He played really well, and it was like, what? Who is this guy, and what does he have to say? So we sat and talked to him for a while, and somebody we knew booked him for a show not too long after that, and he came up to the area and played a few shows. So I've seen him play a handful of times live. I've kind of became friends with him online, and here and there we've talked to each other when we're in the same area. So he became kind of a buddy of mine over the last year, not even the last year, and he's got a really interesting story. Every time I talk to him, he's got new things to say and new stories to tell, and it's wild. I still don't think I've got all the good stories out of him yet. So check out this podcast episode. We go over all sorts of stuff, and it's a fun one. We were outside at a park when we recorded this, and some people came by and stuff. So check it out. It's kind of fun. We give somebody a shout out in this one that ran by, and it's just kind of a fun episode all around. So hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. This is episode number 158 with Michael Huskey.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
Today I'm sitting down with Michael Huskey. Michael, you and I actually met at a singer-songwriter night. I don't know if that's like the exact name of it. We were talking about that earlier. But it was a singer-songwriter night in Iowa City at El Rey's. And Jesse had got a booking down there, so I went down and played with him, and we stayed around till the end and saw you. And afterwards we were like, dude, you're amazing. Got to get your contact info and everything. And Nate from Bootleggers was there and ended up like getting you a couple bookings out of the deal. And it was just kind of a cool night to like sit back and meet somebody that, was a singer-songwriter, because those open mic nights they have down there, or those singer-songwriter nights, are like all-encompassing. You have people playing acoustic guitars, you got beginners, like semi-pro people, you got rap, you got everything going on at those. So it's kind of like an eclectic group, and it was like, oh, there's another singer-songwriter guy here or whatever. This is super cool. So, we kind of, the lot of us, kind of interacted with you here and there, whether or not you were coming up to Fort Dodge to play shows, or whether or not, you were trying to find different bookings in the area, and we kind of steered you in different directions as to places to play and stuff. So it's kind of nice to have somebody from out of the area come into the area and kind of share what they have going on. But you and I have talked quite a bit, but at the same time, I also don't know too much about what led up to the point of us meeting you at a singer-songwriter night. So let's kind of go into that. Have you always played guitar? Let me ask you that.
Well, it all started. Yeah, I was a little kid in grade school. Must have been, I don't know, somewhere between third and fourth grade. Started paying attention. My mom played guitar. My dad played guitar. And, grew up in a family of musical people generationally. Back to, on my dad's side, my great uncle Ferlin Huskey was an old country western star. On the Wings of a Dove was his big number one crossover hit. I guess it was the first number one country crossover to the pop charts. And then he did another one called Gone, and I guess he had like a couple dozen top 20 hits over the course of 20 plus years during the 50s to the 70s. And he fell into all those truck driver songs that everybody fell into, like Conway Twitty and all those guys back in the 70s. But he was inspirational, growing up in the Midwest. I was born in St. Louis, but we moved around a lot, and so that gypsy blood,
Yeah.
moving me all over literally the world. But those early inspirations of folk and early kind of folk rock, everything from the Beatles through Bob Dylan and James Taylor and Jim Croce, all that stuff was ingrained early on by them. So I grabbed this little nylon string Spanish guitar my mom had and started learning how to play basic chords, and took a couple lessons, and the next thing you know, I was playing guitar. And we were talking about it earlier. It was one thing to do it for fun, and everybody was supportive of that. But when you started thinking and talking about doing this for a living, like, forget a job, let's go do this, you're going to end up with kind of different responses from different influences. Mom's like, yeah, live your dreams, do it, and growing up in a hippie family, I figured that's how everybody'd feel about it. But Dad was, no, get a job, and be realistic and all that. So I have wondered many times, what would have happened had, I continued really taking it seriously and really thinking about it as a career rather than being the quote-unquote late bloomer that I became to do it later. But yeah, I've been playing, in bands, and I guess in the late 90s, I had basically lived that life that Dad was prescribing early on, and I got to the end of that rainbow having everything I ever wanted financially, houses, cars, businesses, and realized this isn't it. I'm just not happy.
Yep.
Living this life. It's not really what I'm about. And I got more and more into music, and my first song popped out of me called Suddenly back in '99, and I realized that I've been doing it backwards. Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to think in order to write a song, you'd have to write the song and then set music to it. Well, I couldn't do it that way. One day I was just playing some chords, and this song came to me, and I went, oh, that's how I write. It just kind of comes through me. And that's when it started about 22 years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember you telling me about Ferlin, your great uncle. So that's like your dad's uncle then, maybe?
It's my dad's uncle, my grandpa's brother.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about him playing at the Opry and how he didn't quite fit in for what they were doing back then. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go peruse some Ferlin Huskey stuff. So I went online, and you can find videos of Ferlin playing at the Grand Ole Opry, and they're kind of like introducing him and giving him crap at the same time, where it's just like, this guy's a pop star, he's not really a country star. Like, are you even a musician? You're pretty much giving him crap like that. And he was just like, go away, I'm doing music now. Everyone was nice to each other, but it was still just kind of like, wow, they were kind of throwing him some shade here, didn't quite fit in, but he still went out there and killed it, and it's just kind of a crazy thing to think about, how music has changed from then till now, because Wings of a Dove, if I'm not mistaken, was written by somebody else, but popularized by
Bob
Ferlin.
Ferguson wrote the song. It was a gospel, and then Ferlin took it to the country charts. What he did was kind of odd. He took a gospel song, set it to this weird, almost like a polka time signature. And clapping, and it was very, different. It was so it was like honky tonk meets gospel meets, to me, polka or something good. It was none of that when you'd hear it. It was kind of a moving song. And so people really latched onto that message. But yeah, he was a square peg in a round hole. He and Elvis and Johnny Cash, these were people that were coming onto the scene at that time, and they were all like that. If you were going to really make any kind of headway, you weren't going to be like everybody else. And Elvis was out there shaking his hips and getting all kinds of crap for that.
They're zooming in, filming him just from the waist up.
But he was Elvis, right?
Yep.
What are you going to do? And the same thing with Ferlin. His persona was bigger than the rules.
Yep.
So they had to kind of make some considerations. But once he'd had enough, they were saying you can't kick, because he was, who ever heard of a country star kicking like a cabaret, dancer? And he would, and he had an alter ego, Simon Crumb, which was eventually Gomer Pyle, and he didn't even care that they stole that from him. That was
way.
His. If you ever check it out, search some more on there and look for Simon Crumb.
I'm gonna have to check it out.
In the voice, in the character of Simon Crumb, he could do anybody's voice. So it was like his artistic license to be as out there as he wanted to be, and you'd be like, whoa, why isn't he singing like that? But he had formed an identity out of that particular style, the Ferlin brand, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to loggerheads at one point when, they didn't want him to have a drummer on stage. We don't do that at the Grand Ole Opry, and you can't kick. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go do my own show. So he went over to one of the networks and started a variety show. Never really panned out. It was, a short-lived thing. But then he took off to Ireland and became a huge star over there after he'd had a couple of hits over here, came back and then kept working on the hit machine. And I've kind of followed a lot of his story through family members and my own research. And, his last album, after all that, now he's in the country western Hall of Fame, and, Wings of a Dove turned out to be a top 5 all-time country song, canonized by all the greats, all that sort of stuff.
Been covered by everyone.
But his last album was produced out of Texas, Heart of Texas Records. And I talked to the guy, kind of interviewed him a little bit and on the phone. And he said, the funny thing is by the end of Ferlin's career, we couldn't sell more than 10,000 albums. We didn't even break even on that album, his last album. And that's just the curve of that particular genre of music, you know. At that point, we've got all these new country stars coming up, and they're starting to form literally a whole new style of country music that we now know as kind of pop country. But he has quite a story. He was like next door neighbors to Johnny Cash, and and they were buddies, and he'd come over for dinner and stuff. One time they were over at Johnny's place for dinner, and Johnny was always, at this point in his life, he'd really mellowed out from his lifestyle, and they were praying over their food. And afterwards, Johnny was saying the prayer, and afterwards he goes, "Yeah, but Lord, I do miss the drugs." Everybody laughed and broke bread, But that's the kind of people that he would hang out with in a more natural environment. He was comfortable with those that were not necessarily, going with the flow of society in a way.
That was a nice way. I was going to say like PC, but that's not quite, like. But do you think that like Ferlin had some influence on you, or maybe even your dad when you said your dad played guitar? Do you think he had some influence on you guys playing guitar, him being a musician?
I think it was inspirational that anybody from our family, especially somebody who was from a dirt floor environment in Missouri, and his dad was an old farmer who very poor. That literally they. When they were kids, my grandpa and Uncle Ferlin, when they were kids, they didn't even all have shoes. I mean, these are real old stories of, poverty growing up in the South. And, to be able to come from that and just decide one day, I'm going to Nashville. And he went and knocked on a few doors. And, then the next thing you know, he's in L.A. And the next thing you know, he's a star.
That's crazy.
Pretty wild.
That's wild. Oh, man. Okay, so now here's another one. Do you think that him having success and maybe viewing it as like catching lightning in a bottle, do you think that might have had something to do with your dad being like, well, maybe you should just get a job and go that route
instead? He knew the odds.
Yeah.
And, he also could identify, instant natural talent, which Ferlin, everybody knew he always had. He was born to be an entertainer, and while I might have been funny and I might have had some chops on guitar or this or that, he just probably didn't put all that together as anything, that I should really bank on. And he was probably right to some degree, but again, what do you do if you have somebody with that kind of passion and desire and some talent? Do you want to get behind it and really invest in it?
That's true. I mean, like, I feel like that's something a lot of us kind of consider in our lives too. Because I mean, I've interviewed a lot of different musicians, and it's like, did any of us really ever thought, none of us really thought we'd ever quote unquote make it big, but it was always like a glint in our mind. It was like, well, I'm not negating that. It might happen, maybe.
Anything's possible, right?
But,
Right.
But we all try to root ourselves in quote unquote reality when it comes down to things like that. But, I guess what kind of drove you as an adult to shift gears and go back to writing music and trying to play out at shows?
Well, heartbreak of, the end of a marriage and, where I thought I was headed and the road that I was fairly committed to, financially and, all of that, kind of looking at the end of it going, nope, this isn't going where I had hoped. And here I am, what do I love doing more than anything? And, that was part of my life the whole time, whether you look at it as a meditation or, your own private, closet fetish of playing music for no one but yourself. If there's a passion around that and you're starting to actually enjoy that, then, you grow in that art. And for me, about the time, all that was happening in 99, and that first song came to me, I realized that this is what I wanted to do. I didn't know how soon I would get after it and in what ways, but there were little nudges all along the way. Like during that summer, I was living in Durango, Colorado at the time, and I'm hanging out at this, used to go hot springing all over the place, and there was this one hot spring called Trimble Hot Springs in Durango. And I'm just enjoying myself, hanging out, and nice sunny day, and this guy starts talking to me who's also soaking, and he turns out to be a musician, and we start talking about what we're talking about now. And isn't it funny how we wait, why do we wait? And he's like, you really want to play again? I go, I am playing, but I haven't been on the stage in a long time. I'd like to get back on one of these days. Well, our conversation evolved to some beers at a local blues club. And they had a stage upstairs, which was kind of like your mainstream blues acts, and then downstairs I always called it dirty blues, like the just down in the trenches, good old blues. And we were down there and on that, watching the band on that stage. And we're in flip flops, fresh from the springs, having a couple beers, and the guitar player stops at the end of one song and says, "We got any guitar players out there?" Holds up his guitar, and my new friend elbows me in the side. I come shooting off my bar stool, and whack, whack, both, on concrete, both flip-flops, and everybody turns and looks, and I'm just like, what am I going to do now? I did say I do want to get back on stage, so I'm like, all right, what the hell? And I get up there, not having played for people in, gosh, I don't remember how many years, because it was a high school band, I think, the last time I'd really been on stage. And I just broke out this funk song, and these guys were pros, and they were laying it down, shredding over the top of it, and people were up dancing, and we'd finished the song, and I was like, wow, guys, thanks. That was a lot of fun, It like really got me charged again. And they're like, where do you think you're going? Like, what? Like, we want another one out of you. Look at these people, and they're all screaming and stuff, and I'm just like, all right. So then we did a blues tune, basic blues tune, and that was it. That was when I realized, okay, well, not only do I love doing this and do I want to do it, but it seems like people want me to do it. And then friend after friend is like, what are you doing? Why are you not on stage? You're good at this. And I'm like, not really. I mean, I'm just like anybody else. And yeah, I am. Yeah. You're just like anybody else. But over time, it's like, I forget who it was, some prolific, it was Sting, was interviewed one time, and they're like, what's the secret to your success? What's the secret? I'm going to tell you the secret to my success. It's 3 things. Number 1, practice. Number 2, practice. Number 3, practice. And I was like, that's it. Yep. You've really got to hone what it is you're doing, because even when you're singing, like we were talking about whether people can sing or not, I used to think I couldn't sing, but you can. Everybody can sing. You just got to find your voice. Yep. And then over time, you refine it. You knock off that little thing that spur that you didn't want coming out of your throat. What was that? Well, I can control that. I can shape my voice around what I want to, actually express. Yeah. It just takes time.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, like, that's something I'm still trying to figure out, because I'm not like a prolific singer by any means, but like, I guess if absolute need be, I can hold a tune slightly well enough to pull it off. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm starting to also figure out, like you said, there's some things that I would do when I was singing where it's like, oh, that doesn't sound good, so I'm just gonna not do that anymore. But then you start to find, like, well, what can I add to it now that I took something away? And before you realize, you're like, oh, I can actually do a little bit of this. It's not like I'm incompetent or whatever. So it is kind of fun. Like, you're what you're saying, it I feel a lot of that in my young life, like right now. For example, a buddy of mine plays drums, and he's trying to like figure out a way to like get into a new scene. He's played all sorts of like rock and metal and punk and things like that. But like one of the things that somebody had mentioned was like, he thinks he might be too old for this, and it's like, dude, you're 2 years older than me at most. Like, and I'm only in my like early 30s, so So I'm like, we're in our 30s already having this. Like, am I too old for this? Should I not do this? And I'm assuming in like the 90s, that's about how old you were. 20s or 30s. So like, it's just like it's kind of weird that we're having these like same parallels to an extent. With what we have going on. But if I recall correctly, didn't you play music before then too, though, with some bands?
Yeah. In high school, it's funny. You hear these stories of near misses, and people who just happen to be at the right place at the right time, that sort of thing. I was the guy who was at the right place with sometimes the wrong people at the right time. And in Marin County, California, San Francisco Bay Area is pretty well known for a lot of prolific musicians, coming from there or relocating to there and then becoming famous from there. Van Morrison's a great example from Ireland, and he hit it from the Bay Area. Just on and on. I used to live down the street from the drummer for Journey, and
oh, cool.
Back then, we had I was really into metal, and so I would go see anybody who could shred on the guitar. That was my passion, and so we had this one band. It was kind of a new wave rock band. And the drummer and I weren't into it. We wanted to move on to metal exclusively. So we left that band and started a band called Iron Rose. Mm-hmm. And, I was playing rhythm and singing lead, and he was doing drums. We found a bass player, and we were looking for one of those lickety-split, Eddie Van Halen type guitar players. And we found one. It was the best we'd ever seen, mm-hmm. In the Bay Area at least. But an ego on him like you wouldn't believe. And
yeah, sometimes those two follow each other around a little bit.
Yeah, and he was a little too important for the band, so we didn't get a lot accomplished. This guy was crazy. He called up in an English accent and set up 10 gigs with these high schools throughout the Bay Area, telling them we were from England. Iron Rose from England. We want to do the kids a favor, and come over and play some gigs. We'll just, $400 a gig, $100, each.
In the 80s or 90s,
yeah,
that's pretty 80s.
Wild. And he booked them, all 10 of them. We're like, well, great, we better get these shows together. We got to get 33 songs down fast, and some of them are original, some of them. And this guy kept blowing off practice, and we kept having to cancel all these gigs until they were all canceled. And the band was like, we're done. This guy's a flake. And he shows up for the last practice late as usual. And we're like, we're pretty much going to let him know we're not going to keep going with this thing. And he goes, well, I have to level with you. I got to tell you why, this has been going on. This whole time I've been playing with you guys, I've been trying out for Metallica.
Yeah.
And we're like, Metallica? Oh, yeah, we heard of them.
Yeah. That was...
they had come up from L.A. and they'd married up with one of the guys in Marin County in their band. They were playing, places, little clubs like the Stone in San Francisco, and starting to build a name. And they were looking for a guitar player. I guess their first guitar player didn't work out very well, and they said it was down to him and one other guy. And they said, you were a better guitar player, but you're too arrogant for us.
A little unwieldy.
Yeah. And so we're like, yeah, that's our problem. You're the best guitar player we've ever seen, but, you're just a little too big for us, apparently. So Ron went on to play in this band called Jet Boy, and they made some albums. They had, a charted song called Feel the Shake. It was kind of an AC/DC sounding song. And that's when I kind of hung it up. I was like, if I haven't gotten it together by now, I'm going to fall back on Dad's idea and, get with it financially and get into the business world and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, still was playing, and, I think formed another, right after that experience of writing that one song, I formed a band in Durango, and it was pretty tight, but we kept losing drummers. It was like Spinal Tap, the story of Spinal Tap.
There's nothing but a little green globule, you see.
Like, what is the deal? Why can't we get out of our own way and get something going here? So, after amassing my dream rig, the Mesa Boogie Series Mark IV, head with the 212-inch Celestion cab and the, really nice old Fender Strat and all that sort of stuff, I just finally kind of hung it up and went to the acoustic, and that's when all this started to kind of happen. Now,
I do recall you telling me a story about that Mesa Boogie head. So, okay, I'm gonna lay this down here. So, one of the, I would say like the first 30 podcasts I did with a guy that went to Berklee School of Music, and his name's Alejandro Trevino. So scroll back and look at that one. But before the episode, he was just like, "Here, let's listen to this album." So he's like, "Go back, let's listen to this album before we do this." So we're listening to this album. I'm like, "Man, this is some wild, wild music. What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, this is Al Di Meola, I think it was Electric Rendezvous was the album,
yeah.
and I was like, this album it's insane.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't fit. It's jazz, but it doesn't fit like anything.
It's like jazz rock fusion.
It's some weird fusion stuff, and
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy. So like after that, I was like all into jazz, and every now and then I'd spin it past him, like, I like that. Give me someone else to listen to, So he was the joke for a while was he was like the jazz dealer in the area, So, but you actually have a story with that Mesa Boogie Head and Al Di Meola, if I'm not mistaken, don't you?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Al was definitely, one of my favorite at that point, probably my favorite guitar player. Randy Rhoads had passed away, and I'd done my mourning over of the loss of Randy Rhoads. He was the number one for me for a while, and then I came across Al and was just blown away by his diversity and his dexterity and the soul that he has coming through those multiple guitars. I mean, everything from Spanish flamenco to literally anything you wanted to hear on the electric, he could do that too, and then the steel string, he was a master of that. So yeah, I was really impressed with what he had going on, and I'd seen him live. A friend of mine was running the Fort Lewis College. The venue there where they have all the music, and he mentioned that Al was coming to town and had made a special request. And Al loves to play through Mesa equipment, and he goes, "I can't find you're the only one who has a Mesa amp around here." And I said, "Well, lucky for us, it's probably the one he wants to play through too. It's the most sought after one. It was the 88." At that point, the 88 series Mark IV head, switchable 60 to 100 watt head, just phenomenal what you could get out of this thing. And I go, it's just collecting dust. I'm sad about that, but yeah, I'm happy to let you use it for that. I just want to come to the show, see how. He's like, no problem. I mean, I had that, not the front row. Everybody wants the front row. No, I wanted to be halfway back, right in the middle, perfect sound, so I could hear him. And there he is playing through my Mesa Boogie amplifier. And at the end of the show, he goes to my buddy who ran the place. He says, "You need to buy this amplifier. You need to keep this here for anybody who wants to really play through some good equipment." So he came to me afterwards and asked me if he could buy it, and I ended up selling it to him. So it feels good to know that not only Al played through it, but a lot of probably really good musicians have played through it over the years, and it went to good use at least.
That's super wild to think that you loaned out some gear to somebody and Al Di Meola played on it, and then when it all comes down to cut and dry, somebody else ended up buying it for you, and like you said, who knows who's played on this thing over the years,
Yeah, I'd have to call him back and find out, but I bet it's some pretty impressive individuals.
Yeah, I mean that's another wild. That's the thing I think is crazy about hearing some of these stories that you're telling is they're almost like it's like all this cool stuff can't happen to one guy, but for some reason it did,
Yeah.
Do you think all these weird chance meetings loaning out an amp to Al Di Meola or playing with a guitarist that tried out for Metallica, do you think all these things were slight weird inspirations, or at the time did they feel like odd setbacks, well, I played with this guy, we had this band, it was awesome, but he's trying out for this other band and now he's just gone, and then I have this cool amp and I'm playing on it, but I don't really play it that much anymore, so I sold it. Are these inspirational stories, or are these sad stories, or
Well, time changes everything, right? Mm-hmm. So in retrospect, they turned into great stories, but when they were happening, they were the experience of that belief system that says, the other foot's going to drop. It's not going to work out. You can't really do this. Yeah, and so at the time, it was an honor, and I was happy to be a part of all of those stories that occurred, in my life. I mean, meeting all kinds of incredible people over the years, from Muhammad Ali to Michael Jordan, all these kinds of scenarios where, while they're happening, you don't really think about it as a string of pretty significant, mind-blowing events. But when you look back at it, they all kind of show up as a pretty cool painting, a really, really interesting story to tell.
Yeah.
And I love to tell those from the stage, too, just different little run-ins. The Michael Jordan one is probably one of my favorites because, everybody wants an autograph and this and that, and I just happened to be in the same place as him and had a moment to ask him, hey, I don't want to bug you, but can you give me some advice for my son? His name is Jordan, too. And by the way, my name's Michael. He laughs, 'cause the similarities
Michael and Jordan.
And yeah. And he's like, well, he goes, well, how old is he? I go, he's only 4. This was, 23 years ago. And it was his last year with the Bulls, but nobody knew it yet.
Mm-hmm.
including him, I think. He wasn't totally sure he was going to retire yet for
Yep.
that final time. But he goes, well, tell him to enjoy the game, because I told him he was a little athlete. And he was starting to get involved in different things. And I said, great, I'll tell him you said that. And then he grabbed me by the shirt and he pulls me closer. He goes, no. Tell him to enjoy life.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you definitely exemplify enjoying my life, Michael. I'll tell him you said that.
Yep.
And the next morning was the funniest part. Here he is, my 4-year-old son. We're staying like 1 block off the beach in Huntington Beach, California, and little vacation. And we're at breakfast, and I'm excited to tell Jordan this story. I met Michael Jordan last night. He's like, who's that? I go, Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls, number 23. He goes, oh, the one who scores all the points? I go, yeah, him. and he told me first to tell you to enjoy the game, but then he said enjoy life. And Jordan's looking at me like I'm from another planet. He's like, Dad, let's go to the beach.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, joke's on me. He's already enjoying life.
Yep.
You can't give that advice now. Maybe later it'll mean something to him. So
Yeah.
retrospect, Jordan has a great story to tell now.
Oh, that's really cool. I guess I never, that's the other thing is like I said, you and I have talked like before gigs, after gigs, randomly meeting up, talking on the phone while, one of us is driving to a gig or whatever. But I never heard that Michael Jordan story. So that's pretty cool, And I have a feeling that I'm not going to peel all of the cool stories out of you in just 1 hour either, so.
Yeah, there's a couple.
So we've got a little taste of like what it was like in your early life, some of your first bands, transitioning to selling some of your gear because the dream might not seem like a reality to the point where like, oh, now you've rejuvenated your passion for playing music by playing in a blues bar, to writing a new song in the late 90s. So let's try and like pigeonhole what happened between like 1999 and 2020-ish when you and I actually met each other.
Well, we were talking about the value of playing at these open mics and jamming with people and really getting into it and doing what you love. I think that's the most important thing, and that's what I started to do was any chance I got to play with other musicians, especially those that were better than me. I started finding ways to get that accomplished in jam sessions and, everywhere. Even living in Hawaii, and I'd bring my guitar to the park, somebody'd show up with an ukulele and, have a story about Don Ho and who knows what. And, we're out here jamming and all of a sudden people are around dancing and enjoying it. And it was like, wow, this is fun. Or busking, in Sausalito, sitting in the same spot where Otis Redding wrote the song Sitting on the Dock of the Bay.
Oh, cool.
And playing for people there and meeting people. This was interesting because it was, there's all these open mics and little gigs and things and, house parties and, jamming with people. And then one day, I decided I want to finish writing a book that I've been working on for a while called Freedom Beyond Belief. It's about challenging these belief systems that keep us from living our dreams. And so I had rented this master bedroom in this house overlooking Muir Beach in Marin County on the other side of Mount Tamalpais. Just absolutely stunning little London pub, just like if it was like they pulled it right out of London and stuck it on the beach or near the beach. So I'd go down there for little cultural breaks and playing darts and stuff. But over in Mill Valley, I'd busk, and then I'd head over to Sausalito to that spot I was telling you about. And those kind of things would keep my chops up and keep me really integrated into the music scene. And from there, I would, find other musicians, a hand drummer who, he was part of the Escovedo family.
Was that Vino? Oh my God! We were just talking about you.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
This is the jazz inspiration just ran.
I'll get a hold of you later, man.
Just jogged by us.
That's wild. Yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, the guy that started the whole Al Di Meola thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Sorry to train wreck the story there. That was wild.
That's awesome. It's just exactly what I'm talking about. Like you just never know, and the next thing you know, this guy is just a meticulous, incredible hand drummer. He's played all kinds of drums, but he settled on the hand drums and just congas and all of that. And from Gloria Estefan and all those, that's his sort of domain. And so we started playing together, and he got us a gig playing at a little place in Sausalito, and so all these relationships and friends that we meet, as we play music together, out of the pure love of what we do, all this other stuff starts to open up. Same with you. You know, also a big inspiration for me was living in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where in the northern part of Thailand, a place called Boy Blues Bar. He didn't know how to pluralize his name at that time, I guess, so he didn't call it Boy's Blues Bar because his name was Boy. His nickname was Boy.
Oh, okay.
So we just called it what he called it, Boy Blues Bar. And there'd be artists from all over the world playing there. This guy was featured in like prolific blues magazines in America and whatnot as, you know, a destination. And so we'd go in there and play open mics on Monday nights and, you know, go crazy with everything from Van Halen to, you know, Led Zeppelin to ZZ Top to originals and, you know, just messing around. So, yeah, I think collaborating and, you know, playing out as often as you can for, you know, as long and as many engagements as you can. That's what I was working on. And, yeah, it's the same thing with meeting you and then, you know, 5 gigs up here in northern Iowa within 2 weeks as a result of those conversations. 2 of them at the same place, Bootleggers last night and Bootleggers again next Saturday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and which is still, I mean, an amazing place to play. The people you meet at all these different bars is always interesting, but just, you know, developing those relationships and people who, you know, fall in love with one of your guitars and you're in the middle of buying another guitar and so they want to buy that guitar and you know, I think I've sold 2 different guitars out of Bootleggers to a new friend who was like, whenever you want to get rid of that Martin, you know, you give me the call first. And I'm just like, geez, because if I ever need the money and if I ever really need to sell that Martin, I will.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually there for one of those because I believe you had like an electric guitar there that you brought with. You were like, maybe I'll play it, maybe I won't. I don't know. And then somebody's like, what are you gonna do with that guitar over there? And you're like, I don't know. I just brought it with. And he's like, you want to sell it? You know, it's just kind of crazy how that all kind of like came about. That same guy when I was there playing like a PVT 60 and he was just like, you want to sell that guitar? And I was just, he knows what's good. Yeah. And I was just kind of like, not really. So I shot him like an astronomical price, like absolute top of a top line price. And he was just like, nah, I'm good. And I was like,
exactly.
I get it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty wild though. Like I've long since said like this area, there's no like favoritism. There's enough pie for everyone to get a slice. Everyone kind of just looks out for each other. And I mean, I hope that's the way you feel about coming up to this area. Because
I've considered moving here. You know?
Really?
Yeah, many times.
Cow.
But the only reason I didn't, I mean, it was definitely second on my list. I really like that little town, Iowa Falls, a lot.
Yeah.
And I've been playing over there as well. I'll be playing there again at the 503 coming up. But the reason I didn't is my kids have moved to, well, my daughter's about to, but my son's moved to Texas, and there's a pretty lively music you know, situation going on down there that from Austin down to San Antonio. So I'll be right in between those 2 cities. And so that's where I'm headed. After these gigs, I'll be heading straight to Texas.
Just up and moving then.
Yeah, it's time to go.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be like your MO. Like you said, you lived in Thailand for a while. Like what made you move to Thailand?
Yeah.
I'm going to put a windsock on the mic. Sorry, everybody.
Right. There's that sound we love.
Yep. Oh, man. Oh, my gosh. I apologize. I'm such a professional. Yeah, I'm not fixing it in post.
Not fixing anything in post. Ain't going to be no post.
No.
So Thailand was one of those things I always wanted to go, and I never had. And, you know, been, you know, doing the backup plan to make sure that, you know, one day I'll have enough money to retire and all that sort of hoo-ha. And I was living in Hawaii, was working with a solar company and managing their sales and marketing for them. And my next door neighbor was a solar installer. We'd become friends, and we thought about starting our own business. So I'm still thinking down that line of, you know, that business. And and my son's living with me. We're overlooking the ocean on the Big Island. You know, we can go up in the wintertime and have a snowball fight, and then be down swimming in 80-degree water,
nice.
You know, the same day.
Oh my God, that'd be
I'm going,
so
I think
cool.
We've pretty much arrived. Like, this is, where else could you be on this planet that would be more amazing? Like, all but 2 of the world's climate zones are on that island, plus an active volcano. So if you really want to get crazy, you know. And my daughter came out to visit, and I go, well, guys, this is it. I'm like standing at the pinnacle of everything I've ever wanted to do, and this is it. And I'd love for you guys to stay, and I'll help you do whatever you want to do. And I can play locally here, music, and feed my dreams that way, and grow this business. And they're like, no, we want to go back to the mainland, and we've got other plans. And I was like, all right. And then I'm sitting there one day, and I'm looking out over the ocean, and I'm like, I don't want to live here by myself. You know, I'd rather be here with my family or whatever. And I'm single, and I've always wanted to go to Thailand, so I sold everything. And as I'm going, my son called me up, and he said, while you're at it, look into human trafficking. It's a real big problem. You know, and he was thinking in terms of the problem that Thailand and Southeast Asia has, which is prolific, but it's a worldwide problem. So I promised him I'd look into it. Well, that started a whole nother passion project that ended up being called childrenhelpingchildren.org. We lost our funding, unfortunately, but we were able to prove concept on how to literally end social injustices like human trafficking through the school system. Instead of being indoctrinated, you know, through a school system, which most of them are real good at doing, get the kids to think critically and start from their dreams at an early age. You know, what is your dream? What do you want to do? And then tailor an educational curriculum to their desires of what they want to do in life. You can keep changing it based on their changing desires, from 1 minute wanting to be a chef to a rock star to a whatever it is. But math still applies, chemistry still applies, all these different things. And we proved concept, and that one was a real passion play for about 3.5 years over there. And meanwhile, getting to play music at this really amazing. Speaking of like challenging your belief systems about yourself as a musician, so I used to go to this jazz club, Back to Jazz. I'd play at Boy Blues Bar because everybody played there, and it was a lot of fun, a great place to hang out and jam. But there was this jazz club in Chiang Mai too, and these musicians were seriously good. And so I would never venture onto that stage. It was just too technical, but one day they asked me up. So I went in and I was like, oh God, what could I possibly play? I'm like, I have this one funk song. That's it. That's the same song
Oh, nice.
I played on that one stage in Durango at that blues club. And those jazz players just completely carried me through that song. I laid down that funk rhythm, and then they just built a song around it with the saxophone and all this other stuff. And by the time it was over, we had the crowd up again, just going crazy because, I guess that's how that organically happens. But yeah, they helped pull me through yet another moment of, I'm probably not very good, not good enough or whatever. And like, dude, you're good enough.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a lot of musicians have that thought process, though, of the, like, not good enough, and I mean, that's pretty much what made me not play guitar from, like, 20 to, like, 27, honestly. It was just, like, I just looked around at, like, everyone around me, like, that guy's better than me, this guy's better than me. That was when I was listening to, like, Steve Vai and all that stuff. I'm like, I'm never going to be this good. It's like, but you don't have to be that good,
By the way, have you ever noticed his photographic memory at work? He remembers every note he's ever played, and exactly how to do it. And so he has this library of music that he could call up at any moment in time and play it note for note. Dude, that's a special gift. That's a whole nother part of the brain. I never had that.
No.
What was that chord again?
Yeah. I remember watching a Steve Vai interview once, and he was just like, well, I used to play it like this, but then I found that, like, as the years progressed, and then I changed amps and, like, the way I set some things up, I should play the same notes but on a different set of strings because it adds, like, a different... And it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I get that there's different tones that come out of different strings, even if it's the same note. But to, like, be that deep into it where you're just like, I changed the way I play it live because it sounds better with my new gear. And it's like, this is weird, dude. This is wild,
And he's like an example. He's a definite virtuoso. The guy was born, his neighborhood up the street from him, his influence was Joe Satriani. Like, on the same street.
That's
what are the odds?
Yeah,
right?
Insanity.
And having, like, the tendencies of somebody who, we know about all these... idiot savants, they call them, although that's not PC anymore, or, the different challenges that people come into with what we might call handicaps, but they're super gifted in all these other areas. Well, Steve came in without the handicap.
Yeah.
Like, the dexterity's there, the memory's there, the creativity's there, the tech mind that he has on top. I mean, like you said, down to the strings, and then understanding the electronics all the way throughout the speaker. That's a whole nother existence.
Yeah, I was watching some of his studio work, and he'll just be like, "Well, give me like a 0.5 dB boost on the 30 hertz
What
and
did he
the
say?
reverb there," and it's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I would have never thought to just be like, "Just to adjust this one tiny frequency, just this much." Like, okay, dude,
Yeah.
like sounds good, you know. Did you ever have any like inspirational people like that that you kind of like really looked up to? I remember you said Randy Rhoads and then Al Di Meola, but
Well, I guess from the very beginning, my dad brought home there were two guitar players. He brought home Peter Frampton Comes Alive, which was just to me an incredible sound. I really still love that whole album and, you know, all those songs.
for a second
But-
I thought you were going to say you brought home Peter Frampton. I was like,
No, the
I
album.
was like, wait a second,
No,
what?
no,
Like,
no, no.
then
I never got to meet him.
I wouldn't put it past you,
No,
given
no.
your life.
No, but he brought the album home, and also he had George Benson's Breezin'. So here we are, jazz guitar, you know, out of one side, and then, you know, this rock thing going on over here. So those two were, you know, and of course, you know, we're all listening to the same stuff at the time. We're listening to Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and all of that stuff, which was inspirational. But those two were pretty prolific. And then, there's a whole string of them from, there's, people that like don't really know as much about, some of them like Steve Lukather from Toto,
Which is
at the end of
surprisingly good guitarist.
incredible guy, but they were, it was like a studio sound that they didn't really want to feature guitar on. So whenever you'd hear him playing his licks and leads and stuff, they were in there. They were all melodically perfectly set up for the songs. But like I would be the guy who's at the end of Rosanna, that song they did, Rosanna.
Yep.
At the very end of the song, you'll hear him doing a lead, just a crazy lead out, and they're fading out. I'm turning the volume up.
Yeah, trying to hear like,
trying
where's
to
this
hear
going? Where's
every
this going?
last note of that lead. I'm like, who is this guy?
Yep.
And Steve Morris, Dixie Dregs, and then eventually the Steve Morris Band. Then he went to Kansas for a while, and that wasn't his cup of tea, so he went back to doing the Steve Morris Band or Project or whatever they called it. I saw him live in San Rafael, a little tiny club called George's, and just maybe 100 people were there. And he gets up on stage and starts doing this incredible guitar work and stops and he goes, "Oh, you probably heard this one on the radio." That's an inside joke that we all laughed at. And most people who aren't musicians, which his fan base is basically guitar players mainly, wouldn't get it because they didn't understand that he's worked his ass off his whole life and he never got real prolific on the main stages of the world, really, other than his brush with Kansas and that sort of thing. But people still didn't know who he was. And he was joking about the fact that, it may be good, you might like it, and I sure liked making it, but the world's missing it because this isn't where the world's at as far as popular music, so you won't hear this anywhere but here or on one of my albums. And that's how it is for some of those incredible inspirations. They're not household names. They're scraping by. They're doing, whatever the day job is, so that they can support their passion of playing. And you would have heard, we've all heard his stuff on the radio, but it's through like car ads and stuff where they want some lickety-split guitar work going on in the background of some big be there, Monday's sale, and in the background. It's like, hey, that's Steve Morris, It's like, who? What are you talking about? It's a guitar ad.
Yeah.
I mean, a used car ad.
Oh my God, what a life to be like that good. And then just like, I guess if you're a musician, you'll take the gigs, it pays the bills, but it's still just like, you're doing car ads. So like, for serious, like, okay, I guess so. But
But yeah, once, speaking of Stevie Vai, once I heard Stevie Vai, I was just like, I mean, though he knows all the tricks, and that song "For the Love of God."
Oh man,
that got me, and the fact that he went out into the wilderness and just wrote that.
Yeah, I had heard that the original inspiration for like the opening lick that he plays, like the opening phrase, the ba-na-na-na, he like actually like thought of that in high school and sang it into a recorder.
Wow.
And was just like, I might use this later in life. And then when it came time to make what is actually like, it's on his third album, when he like wrote that album, he was just like, I need something in here. And he's like, wait, what about that thing I sang into this recorder? And of course he still has the tape somewhere. So he pops it in and he's just like, oh, I'm going to go with this. And he just like ran with this tiny little like I don't know if it's like 4-bar phrase that he had written. It was just like the part of the opening riff, and he just took it to the next level, you know. And for anybody that hasn't listened to it, he takes this lick and he just keeps extrapolating it and changing it until, like, before you know it, it's like unrecognizable, and it kind of swings back to it at the end, you know. And yeah, definitely one of the best for sure. We're talking about like recording music, and then maybe, you know, like people not necessarily getting their just desserts, but you are recording music right now. You're kind of like in the process of dipping your toes into recording some new songs. So have you ever recorded like an album for solo material and things like that, or is this kind of your first venture into that?
The nature of being a late bloomer, it's, you know, it's one of those projects that takes a while. I understand why, you know, it takes people a while to do this sort of stuff now. And you get really meticulous. It's one thing to play something live and, you know, and feel like you've nailed it once in a while, you know, but you're always like, oh, I could do this different or that different. In the studio, you're doing that constantly, you know. And then there's the added, for me, you know, it's not stage fright, it's studio fright. Like, I'm now being recorded. Everything I do is being picked up by very sensitive, you know, recording instruments here. So it's taken me a little adjustment time. But, yeah, we've laid down some foundation tracks and, you know, coming out of my shell and doing that Chris Stapleton song, Starting Over, you know, where I didn't really think I was going to hit that as well. And it's gotten a lot of good response playing it live, and then, you know, and then that recording that I did a little video of for, you know, promotional purposes, and you know, so yeah, and the concept for the album, I feel good about that. It's called American Refugee, which, you know, I'll let you know when I get there, but at some point, it's really kind of the thrust of it is about being, you know, that experience of traveling a lot, leaving the country and kind of seeing what's going on with your country from a distant point of view, and incorporating a worldview around that, and coming back and then feeling like a refugee in your own country, because it doesn't really vastly represent what not only you thought it represented, but what your core values really are. And not to say they aren't here, they are. They're right here. They're everywhere you go with each other. We have them. You know, but they really aren't represented on the big stage.
Yeah,
you know?
in a micro sense, it's everything's kosher in America. But on a macro sense, it's like there's a couple things that could use a little bit of tweaking over here. You know, and you don't really realize it until you step back and look at everything that's going on. And that's not, you know, that's not us being like non-patriotic and things like that. That's just us saying the facts.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love America and the ideals that we were founded upon? Freedom, you know, liberty, you know. And justice, you know, these are foundational, you know, and then to watch them being sacrificed by people who don't really honor, you know, what we really stand for is hard and saddening for people. And the frustration is obvious, you know, more divided than ever, all of that. But I think music is a real good tool for that. You know, we can express what's going on, and you know, I sing primarily about freedom and love, so who can't like that?
Exactly,
you know?
yeah.
But there are some people who, you know, will have really interesting, engaging discussions and debates around some of these ideas, you know, and it's an interesting one for me that, you know, RFK Jr. Is an attorney who's been fighting to keep toxic chemicals out of our food supply, out of our fish and, you know, rivers and stuff for many decades. And he's in a debate with Alan Dershowitz around this. He's like, well, Alan Dershowitz says, I can fight this all the way to the Supreme Court. You know, these mandates are constitutional because you're in the middle of an epidemic, a pandemic, all this sort of stuff. And don't you think that we should be protecting each other with these vaccines? And RFK's position is, yeah, if they're proven safe and effective, but they aren't. And then he goes into his whole litany around here's what's really going on. And then they have a whole nother level of debate. I think these are healthy conversations we all need to be having, not on an emotional or political platform, but as true citizens that are concerned about the future, you know, of our country and of our children, our offspring.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, you were talking about critical thinking earlier, and I remember I went back to college as an adult, and somebody told me once, like, if you get nothing else out of going to college, like, learn how to critically think for yourself and analyze facts and come to your own conclusion.
Absolutely.
You know? And I feel like there's a lot of people that don't do that. A lot of people just kind of, I don't want to just like cast this giant shadow over what everyone does, but I feel like a lot of people are just like, well, I saw on Facebook this thing, and it's like, well, it's not really a great place to get your information, but it's cool or whatever, you know. And I mean, like I went to school with people that would be like, well, I wrote this paper on this stuff and I only got a 65% on it because I used Wikipedia as a source. And it's like, that's not a good source. You know, you need to go to somewhere that's like .org or .edu, or go to like a medical journal, or go to somewhere that has actual statistics, and look at some of that stuff, you know. And it just, I don't know. I just definitely think that is an important thing. And I feel like going out of the country and getting a world view and coming back is definitely something that added to some of that in my life, where I was lucky enough to travel out of the country multiple times in my early 20s and late teens. And that kind of just made me realize that, like, you know, everything's not as great as I thought it was here. But when you come back to America, you're like, this is where I want to be, though. You know, like all the stuff that I love about this place is still like steadfast and intact, but there are some things that we probably should, as human beings, ask each other about what exactly is going on here, you know.
Yeah.
Like you said, it doesn't have to be a political thing. It can just be a thing where human beings are talking about the grand scheme of everything that's going on. Do you think that is I mean, like, obviously you have the American refugee as the concept for the album, or the thought process that's kind of leading towards this. Are you going to do a whole album, or are you just doing like singles or EPs, or?
Well, I'll start off with some singles. I need to finish the song, the title track, American Refugee. But, you know, there's one song that I just completed called Who's Your Friend? And I've been playing that out a little bit. And it asks some provocative questions, and it takes a definite stance, you know, around freedom and what's going on now. But eventually I would like to have it be a full comprehensive album.
No, that'd be sweet.
Around that particular title track.
Gonna be your first album, and I think it's gonna be like, honestly, I think that the concept of it all, like, not that it's gonna be a concept album, quote unquote. The windsocks aren't helping as much as I thought they would. But yeah, so like I don't think it's going to necessarily be like a full-on concept album. Like, you're not going to be telling a story song by song by song that leads to this giant conclusion at the end, or maybe you are. I don't know. But like, I do think.
Well, I'd like to have Chris Stapleton's "Starting Over" song in it as part of that concept, in the sense that I want to talk about some diagnoses, you know, in the songs, and you know what I see going on, and what others that I've, you know, sort of shared stories with and heard their stories too. You know, what they're seeing, and be inclusive of this discussion. But we are also at a precipice. There's a group of people who don't look at everything that's going on as bad. You know, they see it as necessary, and what's next is going to be far better. And so the old concept of starting over, you know, like you know, Chris Stapleton singing about in his song. I like that sentiment. It feels good to me to keep my attention on the fact that, yeah, it is darkest before the dawn. And by the way, it's, you know, it's not as dark as a lot of people think it's going to get from here. So what are we hoping for? What are we looking at? Do we see that light at the end of the tunnel of the starting over? And when do we start? How about right now?
Yeah.
You know, from that level of awareness.
Yeah. Oh, we can't do that. We can't. That's not. No, now's not a good time. Let's
put it off.
Yeah. But I do have to say that, like, even though I think one of the things about music that really kind of drew me in was, even though, like, I spend a lot of time at jam nights, I've made a lot of buddies, I've met a lot of people with the podcast, I play in a handful of different scenes in the Iowa area. And one thing I've thought to myself is, even if I don't agree with somebody's political views or the way they carry themselves or the things they say on Facebook or social media, once the music's playing, all that's out the window. We're all just human beings listening and playing music together and things like that. It reminds me of like a Bill Hicks thing, where he was just like, you watch the news and it's just like murder, death, famine, war, and you go outside and there's just crickets chirping and your neighbor's just like, hey, how's it going? You know, like, I feel like that's a good example of like what goes on in music. Because even if you do make a political stance with your music, or you do try to like bring up concepts that people might not want to discuss, I don't feel like it's something that drives people away musically, because it's just music, you know, especially when you're playing live. People are just like, this guy's over here playing music at the bar. It's awesome. You should come down here, you know, and people aren't thinking like, this guy is, you know, has this thought process on politics or whatever, you know, like nobody ever thinks that, you know, they're always there just to enjoy the music. And I think it's this like, almost like this weird cure-all for all of that kind of stuff. It's where people just kind of, they go in and they're there for one thing, and it's not to argue about politics.
Right,
That's
right.
it's not to argue about what I believe and what you believe, and let's fight about it. There's never any of that's gone on at like a single show I've been to, of the
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of shows I've been to over the years. So
We find more common ground, commonality, what we agree upon,
Yeah.
principle based, And also, I mean, with an old friend of mine drilled this into my head years ago. He's kind of a mentor. He said, "Do you ever notice, with new information, we make new decisions?" And,
Which we
I can
should.
think of when I was dead wrong,
Mhm.
and probably am now about some things. And I'll find out later that, as long as my mind is open to the truth, if that's my true pursuit, then I'm going to find it. I'm going to discover what that truth is. And, it's an unfolding, but it doesn't happen if we're entrenched, if we're stuck in cognitive dissonance, if we're, buying belief systems that are untrue and claiming them to be true. What are we doing? We're creating a false reality for ourselves, like living in fear. Show me where fear is. It doesn't exist. It's not really anything you can localize. It's an illusion created right up here. And if people can understand that can be manipulated, that if you can be made to believe in that and then believe in, some other story that they attach to that, well, then you can be controlled. And I'm not interested in that reality at all. I have no interest in delving into that. But what I find over here on the other side of the fence of a pursuit of truth, freedom, love, understanding, compassion, hey, tell me what you really think. I want to know. That's a different place for me to come from, and I'll learn something new from that space. What am I going to learn being entrenched in all that other stuff?
Yeah, I remember seeing something online, and it was like, if you're having a discussion with somebody and you disagree, ask what it would take to change their mind, and if they can't come up with something, then
Realize you're not going to.
you're not going to change their mind.
Yeah.
It's so weird you're talking about that concept, because like as a teenager, I was so headstrong. I was just like, everything I think is the right thing. Everything I think is the way it should be. And then you start to grow a little bit older, and you go through your 20s, and you make some mistakes in your life, and you realize like, oh, I don't have it all figured out. And then, like exactly like you said, you start to have these conversations with people, and you start to change your mind about different things, and you live a little bit of life, and you go out and you experience other things that are outside of your little, anthill that you're used to staying in, and it kind of changes the way you think about things. And I feel like that's been a concept for you in your life, not just with like politics and a belief system, but just with music. Like you said, you would go out there and play with people you had no idea who they were. They would be more talented than you, and it's just like, oh, I need to learn some of this stuff they're doing, or try and find a way to keep up and match what they're doing, And I feel like it helped out quite a bit, because I mean, you even played a show at the Junkyard in Barnum. You opened up for Jesse when Jesse played there. And then as the night kind of dwindled down, it was just kind of like Jesse likes to like let the show sometimes just be like, who else plays guitar? Get up here and play with us or whatever. And I remember like watching you play some leads on some stuff, and it was just, you're just shredding on an electric guitar. And I'm like, I've only ever seen this guy play acoustic, And I know he's good at electric, but I didn't know he was that good, And it's just like, I don't even want to get back up there now. This guy's so good, but.
No, man, I love your stuff. I've really enjoyed watching you play, especially with Jesse. You guys have a good chemistry together.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's talk about this like new album. Are you going to end up just doing acoustic, or are you going to throw your own leads on there? Are you going to bring in other people?
I'm going to do both. I'll have some of my lead work in there, and then I want to have some slide guitar, some mandolin,
cool.
Some fiddle, some of it. Strings actually. One of the songs I wrote a while back called Rumi's Field. He's got a poem. Rumi's this old poet from way back in the day. And
I was at a wedding, and somebody used a Rumi poem as part of their vow, and I was just like, this is the coolest thing ever.
He was quite a writer, inspired by love. And he has one line in a poem. It says, "I'll meet you out in the field beyond right and wrong." And it just really struck me. He has a very heavenly space, a very non-judgmental, loving, open space. And so I wrote a song called Rumi's Field about that, and I was like, it's not done. It was one of these songs. It's never done.
Yeah.
And I got room for a lead, but it's too long now, and all this different stuff. And and then I come across this cellist, and I'm like, it needs cello. Hey, do this dun 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 dun.
Yep.
And it's just these songs. Once they're done, they're done. But you also have to know when to put down the pen.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually had some conversations recently with some people about that. It's like it almost people are never happy with what they put out musically because you grow and progress, and a year later you're like, I wish I would have done this differently on that.
Yeah.
But also, like, you have to put that thing out there in order to grow and progress and turn around and have that retrospect to look at it and be like, I wish I would have done this differently, but now I can do it differently on a new song.
That's right.
On something new, you know.
And that's the nature of the evolving artist, you know. They're going to have something new. It's going to be, to you, better than anything you've ever made before, but somebody may still hold on to that last thing is the best thing they ever heard. You just don't know how it's going to be received.
Yeah. I mean, that's a life lesson. I mean, you have to live your life and make mistakes and learn from them in order to better yourself as a human being. In, you know, when you look in the mirror in the morning, you know, it's that kind of a concept where, like, if you never take the chance, if you never actually try things, then you're going to get older and be like, I wished I would have at least done it, you know, or like, that's going to be the same concept where it's like, I wished I would have actually released these songs 10 years ago when I had originally written them. It's like, well, you know, you can crap in one hand and wish in the other and see which fills up faster.
That's an old saying of my father.
But that's the truth, though. You know, you've got to actually at least put it out there. So I'm sure you're kind of like doing that, where you've been writing this songs since the late 90s up until today, you know, and I'm sure you've got a lot of songs that you'd like to at least get out there in some fashion on an album, you know. Is anything available online to listen to, like YouTube or Spotify and things like that?
Being that, you know, I got around to my YouTube channel late, I've got stuff all over the place, but at Michael Huskey Music on Instagram, there's some stuff. At Michael Huskey Music on Facebook, there's some stuff. And then Michael Huskey Music on YouTube. And by the way, it's spelled differently than my uncle. He dropped the E for the stage. Easier to sign autographs, I guess. Husky, like the dog. But mine is Michael, Michael, last name Huskey.
Nice.
And they even, at Bootleggers, they write it the way Ferlin did. I don't change it. When somebody wants to turn me into Ferlin, you know, throw his last name up there instead, I don't mind. But yeah, there's stuff on, there's a site, a friend of mine has been working on this thing for decades, and he's co-written a song with me called My Little Sister Saw Elvis.
Yeah, I love that song.
Riding in a UFO.
Love this song.
And that was a long time coming. That song started out over some whiskey 20-something, 30 years. It was 30-something years ago. And didn't get completed until probably 10 or 12 years ago, when he came up with the final cement line. The song itself is it was written during a time when the National Enquirer and all these rags were, you know, reporting all these sightings of Elvis and two-headed alien babies and all this kind of fantastical stuff. And so we wanted to turn that into a funny song, and my sister loved Elvis. So it was My Little Sister Saw Elvis Riding in a UFO, and then, you know, where she spotted him in a pickup truck, and, you know, and later at the end, a Cadillac, and he ain't coming back, that whole thing. But in the middle, I was like, it's not done. There's something missing. And it was the central message that emo, and you can check out his work and some of mine and other really good artists from back in the day too on emosonic.com, emosonic.com, and I've got a bunch of rough cuts and foundation tracks on there under my MP3s. But he came up with it, and we still have a difference on what he came up with, because I think I either heard it differently or maybe I changed it over time because I've played it so many times. But he goes, you know, it's My Little Sister Saw Elvis Riding in a UFO, and then there's a slow kind of a break here where we slow it down, and it's almost talk singing, and the line goes something like, he said life ain't worth living unless you hold each day like a candle in the darkest wind, or no, like a candle in the darkest night on the coldest day. And it's like, wow, you're really protecting that light. You know, that's the sentiment of the line. Now, he sings it differently than I do, and when we get together, we have to agree on how we're going to sing it. But that was the sentiment, and I took away from, you know, that to mean the song was finally finished, you know, and you know when that happens. But, yeah, there's going to be a bunch of old stuff, some new stuff. Couple cover tunes like Wings of a Dove from Uncle Ferlin, and then a song I wrote for my grandmother. She was reading a letter to me from my biological father, who I only had limited contact with in my life. He was kind of a hippie renegade guy who's, talk about stories. Wow, this guy. Yeah, I could go on about him. But anyway, she had me read a letter that he had written to her before he passed away when he was out in Europe or Jamaica or something, and it was basically he was saying, isn't doing battle with evil out in the world, working for God, isn't that good enough? Because she always wanted him to, be like a normal guy who had a job and came home from work and, the 2.2 kids and all that sort of stuff. And that wasn't his life by any stretch. So he's asking her for acceptance. And isn't what I'm doing good enough? And so the song turned into, as she's handing me the letter, she's also handing me his old worn out Bible, which he obviously had used a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so the song's called Daddy's Worn Out Bible. And it's about that. And I think it's like, when I'm getting feedback from others on that song, is that we can all relate to it, because wouldn't we love it if our parents, really did fully embrace and accept what we came here to do. Obviously, parents have certain ideas and ideals they want you to live up to. Some of them are fantastic, of course, but we all have our own path. And can you accept this about me? And so that song will be on there. The first song I ever wrote, Suddenly, will be on there. And then, I really want to put that Starting Over song on there too. So I'll probably have, 2 or 3 cover tunes, and then the rest will be originals.
Oh, man.
Speaking of cover tunes.
Yeah. Hopefully the algorithms don't pick this up and flag it on YouTube. Somebody's cruising by with a boombox.
We had to mute your conversation.
Well, man, I wish I didn't have to wind this down, but unfortunately I do, because we're getting close to a time. Like, I've got a show this afternoon. You've got a show tonight. Do you have shows next weekend, you say?
Yeah. Let's see. Tonight I'm in Clarion at Timbuk Brew, starting at 7, going till 10. And then next week, let's see, it's...
this is coming out on Thursday, so next week will be pretty much exactly like 2 days from now. So yeah, this is coming out Thursday. We're pre-recording. I don't know. Everybody knows we pre-record here, but
yeah. So Thursday, the 23rd of September, I'm at the 503 in Iowa Falls.
Oh, sweet.
7 to 10, it looks like. Oh no, it's 8 to 11. I'm setting up.
So if you're listening to this 7. The day it came out, go to Iowa Falls. Check out Michael Huskey. He'll be there.
The 503. Nice little bar up there. And then the 24th, I'll be at the Shiny Top.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, that's Friday the 24th from 7 to 10.
That's cool. I remember the first time I played at Shiny Top, I was like, this is sweet. I'm at Shiny Top, everybody. It just felt pretty neat for me.
I'm looking forward to that.
It's a good place.
A little stage, too, I guess.
Yeah.
And then Bootleggers again back on Saturday the 25th from 7 to 10.
Sweet. So if you're in the northern Iowa area where I, hang my hat, definitely swing out to one of those shows. I highly recommend it. You'll enjoy yourself. Michael's a great guy, great musician, breath of fresh air. If you're looking for any of those links, they will be in the description section. You'll have to send me the one that the website your buddy had made. That way I can make sure I tag that in the description section. So if you're looking for the links, social media, things like that, they'll be down below. I'll have your Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube page, and that other link that also has some of your music on it. Is there anything that we didn't talk about on this episode that you think should be pertinently talked about that we didn't include?
Do what you love and love what you do. Keep doing it.
Oh, man. That is some of the best advice ever. I wished I would have tried that at a younger age, because like I said, my 20s were pretty much just me being unsure of myself and partying and using it as an excuse, unfortunately. So I wish I really would have stuck with what I loved and what I really wanted to do, because I was kind of just trying to people please, when I was younger, unfortunately. So I'm glad you're out there doing it. I'm sad to know that you're moving away when we just kind of started out this budding friendship, in the last year. But I also know that this probably won't be the last time I see you.
Definitely not.
So Michael, it was great to get to know you in Iowa City. It's been great to get to know you over the course of the last year plus. And it hasn't even really been a year, because I've just been playing with Jesse this year. So, honestly, this has only been a handful of months. And it's kind of crazy to know that I, met somebody through playing music and become as good of friends with them as I have. And it was all based on a random chance meeting, And so I'm really glad to call you a friend, and I'm really glad that you sat down and talked on the podcast with me, because you were somebody, as soon as I met you, I was like, this guy's got to get on the podcast. This guy's got to get on the podcast.
I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, we finally made it happen. So,
well, thank you.
Even
man.
though you're moving away, I feel like a remote podcast is somewhere in the future. If you know, that's something that's in the cards. So. I wish you all the best of luck. And like I said, if you're looking to see him live, some of your last chances to see him live in the near future will be this upcoming weekend. So check those shows out. He'll be all across northern Iowa. So thank you, Michael. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to sit and talk with me, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And it's a long time coming. We've been wanting to do this for a while, so glad we finally did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. That's another good one. Like I said, you know, he kind of just became a friend of mine. Talked to him online, talked to him here and there, shot him some messages, spun some ideas off of him, backwards and forwards. You know, he's a great guy, and I wish him all the luck, you know, moving. So it's kind of sad to see him go, but it'll probably be for the better for him. He's kind of one of those people that goes all around the place. If you couldn't tell by the episode, I mean, guy's been everywhere. He's done a lot of different stuff, and like I said in the intro, we didn't even really scratch the surface here. So check his stuff out online. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If you're in the area, go watch him live. This weekend is the last weekend he will be around, so hit him up somewhere. He's got a handful of shows coming up. We discussed that in the episode. Find him on Facebook. Find him at all the links down below, and give him a follow and check out some of his material if you can. So check that stuff out. I'm glad we got to sit down and do this. We've been trying for a while to get this done, and we finally did. So hats off to him for, you know, just being in the area and having the time to do it. I mean, we had scheduled a handful of different times out, and then ended up rescheduling again. And then I took a booking with somebody to play music, and it was just this whole thing it was just crazy. We finally got it taken care of, though, and I'm really glad we did. So thanks, Michael, for sitting down with me. And like I said, go check out all his links down below. If you're into checking out links, check out the other links down below. There's links for the Audible Farm website. You can find all the Audible Farm goodness there. Give us a subscribe, maybe a like or a follow, something along those lines, if you're inclined to do something like that. I mean, the podcast is going to be free regardless if you're just listening to it. Maybe this is the first episode you listen to, but there are full video versions available on our Patreon page. It costs $1 a month. That's it. You know, it's really cheap. The cost of 1 year of Audible Farm's Patreon is less than one Netflix subscription, according to my calculations. So check that out if you guys are into watching video versions of podcasts. The crazy part about this podcast is some of them take place in like my mini studios. Some of them have taken place in other people's studios. I've recorded episodes at parks. Before I did the video versions, I mean, it was nuts. I was doing episodes in like coffee shops and in people's cars and parking lots, and I mean, it was pretty wild. So check out the video versions. You never know who's going to be on the episodes. You never know where we're going to be. So check those out. It's tons of fun stuff to see what's going on and kind of see us talking, and if that's something that interests you. Otherwise, if you guys are looking for more physical media or physical merch, I guess I should say, you can go to the Audible Farm online shop. Go shop.audiblefarm.com, and there is all sorts of goodies there as well. T-shirts, I got the new designs of T-shirts. They're starting to run out. I've sold out of a handful of the sizes, so hopefully if you want one of those shirts, we got the size you want. If not, I apologize. Maybe we'll get some new shirts in. I've been thinking about a different design, so maybe I'll go with a different design for the next shirt. We'll see. I'll always have the classic shirts. I've got those. I now have two colors. I've got a gray and a darker gray, so it's up to you whether or not you like darker gray or lighter gray for the Audible Farm original shirts. And those also have larger sizes if you're somebody that is in need of larger sizes. I have a lot of people say you don't have the big sizes, but I do have some big sizes. They're available on the Audible Farm online website, or find me at a show. I've been kind of teasing it around, and I'll say it, if you see me at a show, I might give you a discount on shirts. I've been doing that pretty much the last year anyways. So come out to a show, say hi to me out at an intermission or something. I usually have the shirts with me, and I will hook you up with a shirt. So yeah, if you guys are looking for shirts, that's there. Otherwise, I'm probably should get hoodies in again. I've been debating doing a different design on the hoodies. Otherwise, I'll probably get another small order of hoodies in if if I get around to it. Hopefully I will. So check the shop. There will be lots of stuff there. Of course, there's stickers and there's keychains and all sorts of other goodies there. So check out the shop online, and don't forget to check out Michael Huskey's links down below. So his next weekend is this upcoming weekend, like tomorrow as of the release of this episode. He's around, so hit him up, check him out. I'm going to try to make it out to one of his shows if I can. I have some bookings this weekend as well, so come out and find me. I'll be playing I'll be playing with Jesse Wilson this weekend, so check it out. audiblefarm.com for everything else, and thank you guys for listening. We'll check you next week. Peace.